Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It's the import game of the day, and today's game is Raddergy for the Sega Dreamcast. This is a top-notch shooter that was released well after the Dreamcast was discontinued, and it was developed by Milestone, a favorite shooter developer of mine that also produced games like Chaos Field and Kados. One of the things that helps Raddergy stand out from the crowd of shooters on the Dreamcast, aside from its ultra-colorful, cel-shaded graphics, is that you have the ability to use 3 different attacks as the situation warrants. So you have your primary shot that actually comes in 3 different varieties, a standard spread shot, lasers, and a bubble shot, and you also have the use of a sword and shield, the sword being used to swipe away most bullets from the screen and damage enemies, and the shield can block all incoming bullets, but you can't attack while you have it up, so you have to find a balance between the 3 different abilities. On top of that, when you have a full energy bar, you can use a force field to clear all the bullets from the screen and deal massive damage to enemies, very similar to the reflector force ability in the Gigawing games. It's a very fun and challenging shooter with beautiful graphics. I've personally always loved the cel-shaded graphic style, and it fits perfectly with this rather lighthearted shooter, and the soundtrack is great to boot. It has a very funky, groovy sort of techno beat sound to it, and I like it a lot. So this is an all-around great shooter, and it's on the Dreamcast, so obviously you know it's gonna be good. It's Raddergy, and it is indeed totally rad. Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It is the import game of the day, and today's game is Twinkle Star Sprites for the Sega Dreamcast. I've talked about this game before, and I've said that the title should just be changed to fun, because that's what this game is, pure and simple. Like someone turned fun into a physical thing and pressed it down into a Dreamcast disc. This is a game that mixes the unlikely pair of genres of shoot-'em-ups and puzzle games into a single, ridiculously fun gameplay experience. Each character is given half of the screen to play around in, and just like with any top-down shooter, enemies will come at you from the top of the screen, and you're tasked with blowing them away indiscriminately. The difference here is that when you dispatch these enemies, especially if you can chain a string of them together, you send a bunch of additional enemies over to your opponent's side of the screen. So basically, the better you are at blowing away large numbers of enemies, the more chaos you cause for your opponent. It's extremely fun and addictive, and it makes for an especially enjoyable and competitive 2-player versus game experience. You're given a bunch of different characters to choose from that all have different shot patterns, special attacks, and screen-clearing super bombs. Plus, this game features some extremely vibrant and colorful graphics with great character designs and a soundtrack that is upbeat and energetic. It really helps to drive the action forward, though the gameplay is so fast and frantic that it doesn't really need much help. This game is also available on the Sega Saturn and the Neo Geo CD, and while I've never played either of those console ports, I'm sure this is a game that you can't go wrong with, regardless of what you play it on. It's Twinkle Star Sprites, and it's some of the most fun you can have with a Dreamcast. Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It is the import game of the day, and today's game is Puyo Puyo for the Sega Dreamcast. This is a 1999 release that was published by Sega, and like all of the earlier games in the series, it was developed by Compile, who I always thought of as one of the best developers of shoot-'em-ups, but they definitely know their way around a puzzle game as well, because the Puyo Puyo series is definitely one of my favorites when it comes to some good, competitive puzzle action. This installment features a story about the Puyo Circus, which has a connection to a dark force now threatening the land, so there are plenty of recognizable characters from the series, as well as new characters to choose from, and you might wonder why it matters if there are a bunch of characters in a puzzle game, since everyone is basically playing by the same rules, but in this case it matters a lot, as each character has special techniques that can be used to either help themselves or make trouble for their opponent. For example, you can clear Puyos from your side of the screen, add a ton to your opponent's side, prevent them from using their special attacks, and a whole bunch of other techniques to spice the game up. It actually reminds me a lot of one of my other favorite puzzle games, Tetris Battle Gaiden. It's extremely fun, challenging, competitive in multiplayer mode, and like any other game in the series, it's very addictive. Plus, there are a bunch of gameplay modes to choose from to keep you interested, and combined with the 18 playable characters to choose, there's plenty here to enjoy. Plus, you can always expect some nice, colorful graphics and great character designs from a Puyo Puyo game, as well as a poppy, fun soundtrack that matches the look and feel of the game perfectly. There's never been a bad Puyo Puyo game as far as I'm concerned, and Puyo Puyon is no exception. It's awesome. Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It is the import game of the day, and today's game is Cool Cool Toon for the Sega Dreamcast. This is a 2000 release that remains to this day a Dreamcast exclusive, and it was developed and published by SNK, and it's their foray into the world of rhythm games, and it's truly baffling to me that it was never released outside of Japan, because at the time, the rhythm game genre was amassing huge popularity, with games like Dance Dance Revolution, Parappa the Rapper, and Samba de Amigo selling like hotcakes. But somebody at Sega obviously thought this game didn't cut the mustard, and in my opinion, they couldn't have been more wrong. The object of this game is pretty simple, as most rhythm games are. You just follow the button prompts on the screen in time with the music. All 4 of the face buttons will appear in different areas of a circle projected on the screen, and you have to move the joystick to that area of the circle and hit the button at the appropriate time. This starts out easy enough, but eventually you'll be required to jump all over the circle in quick succession, executing more and more complicated button combinations and performing sweeping maneuvers with the joystick. It's very challenging, sometimes frustratingly so, but it's also extremely fun and addictive. Coordinating between the joystick movements and the button presses was tricky at first, but once I got the hang of it, I was having a blast. And in addition to the fun gameplay, this game features some outstanding graphics and sound. I love the cartoony, cel-shaded look. It's very bright and colorful, with some really cool character designs and a wide variety of stages and other various visual flair throughout the game. And of course, with this being a rhythm game, you'd hope for some great music, and that's exactly what you get. Plenty of hip-hop, techno, and dance beat-inspired music that matches perfectly with this style of game. So if you've got a Dreamcast and are desperate for another great rhythm game to add to your collection, then definitely check out Cool Cool Toon. It's very cool indeed. Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It is the import game of the day, and today's game is Kados for the Sega Dreamcast. This is a 2007 release, the last official release on the Dreamcast in fact, and it was developed and published by Milestone, the same developer behind games like Chaos Field and Raturgy, which is a game I love and have featured in the past. And this game is very similar to Raturgy, including in its cel-shaded graphics, but where Raturgy is a bright and colorful game, Kados has a much more drab appearance, mostly sticking with black, white, and gray. It's still a nice looking game, but a little bit more color would have been nice, and the soundtrack is really good too, though it also lacks the lighthearted feel of the one in Raturgy. Presentation aside though, Kados also controls very much like Raturgy, even featuring the mix of sword and shield abilities to go along with your primary shot. A big difference though this time is that the more you use each weapon, the stronger they become with experience points, and you can also collect bonus power-ups to increase the strength of your weapons up to level 100 for each. At first, I was tempted to just go in guns blazing, but when I realized how useful the sword and shield could be once powered up a bit, I switched up my strategy. Plus, you do have a super attack meter that builds up as you destroy enemies, which allows you to surround yourself with a barrier that makes you invulnerable, damages anything it touches, and grants double XP for every enemy destroyed while it's up. All of this together makes for a really fun and unique bullet hell shooter that I have a hard time putting down. I'd say it's definitely the easiest of the 3 milestone games on the Dreamcast, but that's not much of a gripe. This game is excellent. Definitely check out Kados if you love some Dreamcast shooting goodness. Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It is the import game of the day, and today's game is Sakura Wars Columns 2 for the Sega Dreamcast. This is a 2000 release that was developed and published by Sega, and it's obviously an offshoot of the Hanagumi Taisen series, aka Sakura Wars, which, while not being very well known internationally, was a very popular series of RPGs in Japan set in a fictional steampunk version of Earth and featuring a large cast of characters that operate a playhouse as a cover for their true purpose, piloting mech suits to defend Japan and the world. This is clearly not an RPG though, but instead taking those recognizable characters and putting them into a game of columns, which has been a favorite puzzle series of mine for a long time. It's incredibly simple. Just line up at least 3 gems of the same color, either vertically or diagonally, to clear them from the board. This game does spice things up a bit with multiple gameplay modes though. There is the classic columns mode, which pretty much plays like a game of Tetris. Just clear as many lines as you can for as long as you can to rack up a high score. There's also a competitive mode where you can play against either the CPU or another player, and this is always fun and brings to mind games like Puzzle Fighter and Puyo Puyo. And if that wasn't enough, there's also a story mode that incorporates the conversational segments from the main series, and by giving the best responses to each character, you can actually have an easier go of it, or you can make things more difficult for yourself by giving incorrect responses. On the whole, this is a very fun puzzle game with a variety of gameplay modes, and it's topped off with a nice coat of Sakura Wars paint with some very colorful graphics, great character designs, and a catchy soundtrack, which the series is very well known for. If there's a lack of puzzle games in your Dreamcast collection, don't pass up Sakura Wars Columns 2. It's a lot of fun. Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It is the import game of the day, and today's game is Zero Gunner 2 for the Sega Dreamcast. This game is one of, if not my absolute favorite shooters on the Dreamcast, and it's also one of my favorite shooters developed by Saikyo, who also developed such amazing shooters like Gunbird 2, Sengoku Blade, and the Strikers 1945 series, so Zero Gunner 2 is in very good company. Being a Saikyo shooter, there are a few things you can always expect from one of their games. You have a selection of 3 different attack helicopters that each have different shot types and super attacks, and the first handful of stages are played in completely random order. The thing that makes this game stand out from its peers is that it allows you to move in a full 360 degrees and attack enemies from all angles, which means that enemies will also attack you from all angles, which adds an extra level of challenge and makes for an incredibly fun gameplay experience, especially if you have a second player to join in the battle. Also, instead of just picking up super bombs as with any other shooter, every enemy defeated leaves behind energy crystals that power up your super attack, so you have to divide your attention between destroying enemies and collecting energy if you want to stock up on super attacks to use against the game's many different bosses, which are huge, challenging, and have multiple forms to contend with. It's an amazing shooter, and the graphics and sound, while not the kind of colorful affair with high energy music that you'd usually get from a Psikyo game, are still pretty good, but there's no doubt that the gameplay is what really makes Zero Gunner 2 shine. It's very expensive these days, unfortunately, but for what may be the best shooter on the Dreamcast, which is saying a lot, it just might be worth it. Check it out. Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It is the import game of the day, and today's game is Cosmic Smash for the Sega Dreamcast. This is a 2001 release that was developed by Sega Rosso and published by Sega, and it was originally a Sega Naomi arcade game before being ported to the Dreamcast. And I would normally give a quick synopsis here, but I came across an arcade advert that I think does the game way more justice than I could, so please enjoy this dramatic reading of that arcade advert. Blast into the unknown with this totally radical interstellar cubic squash game. Become a funky, gymnastic, backflipping, somersaulting, wall-climbing virtual reality squash player. Travel by a virtual express train to the interstellar recreation room and smash the blocks. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a game of squash set in a virtual world that has a very cosmic motif. If you don't know what squash is, it's basically playing a game of tennis against a wall. You'd normally be playing opposite another person, but in Cosmic Smash, it's more like mixing squash with a game of Breakout. There are blocks of varying size, color, and shape at the opposite end of the court, and you are given the seemingly simple task of hitting them all with a ball and clearing them from the screen before time runs out. It's easy enough at first, but eventually more and more obstacles are placed between you and the blocks themselves will begin to move in various patterns and at different speeds, so with all of those things combined, this game does eventually become pretty challenging. It's a very simple premise, easy to pick up and play, and it's very fun. It's also a really nice looking game, even if the visuals are a bit unconventional. It reminds me a lot of a game like Rez, actually, with its crazy colors and simple geometric shapes, and it features a groovy techno soundtrack that's very fitting to the visuals and the overall vibe the game is going for. So if you're looking for something simple yet challenging and fun on the Dreamcast, you can't go wrong with Cosmic Smash. Check it out. Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It is the import game of the day, and today's game is Border Down for the Sega Dreamcast. This is one of the last games to get an official release on the Dreamcast back in 2003, when it was also released in arcades, though to this day, neither version was released outside of Japan, even though this game had a second print run in 2008 due to demand from Japanese gamers. It was developed and published by G-Rev, the same developer as Under Defeat, another amazing shooter they released on the Dreamcast that I absolutely love. And oddly enough, that game, which was arguably less popular, did eventually get an HD re-release on the PS3 and Xbox 360. This is a game that, aside from its rarity, only 20,000 copies were released between both print runs, and its price as a result. It's a game that's known for being a particularly difficult shooter, and while I think there are much more challenging shooters out there, this one is definitely unforgiving. It features the Border Down system, in which you can start a stage on an easier difficulty setting, but when you lose a ship, you continue the stage at a higher difficulty level, so it's punishing, but with practice, it's not quite as daunting as it first seems. You have two different fire modes during gameplay, a homing shot and a powerful concentrated shot, and you have a very powerful laser weapon that also makes you temporarily invincible while using it. It draws from your ship's power supply though, so the more you use it, the weaker your ship becomes, and it will take some time to recharge. Overall, just like Under Defeat, this is a finely crafted shooter that's very challenging, but also very fun with some solid gameplay and great stage designs and boss battles, plus the graphics are pretty damn good, especially the space battle stages, and the soundtrack is amazing. So if you've got the money to spare or an alternate means of playing it, Border Down is all kinds of awesome. Check it out. Hey everybody, Jim here with your daily dose of Japanese gaming goodness. It is the import game of the day, and today's game is Ikaruga for the Sega Dreamcast. This is a 2002 release that was developed and published by Treasure, and it is a port of the 2001 arcade original. I already knew that this game had an international release on the Nintendo GameCube, but I didn't realize just how many other ports it had gotten. It was made available digitally on a ton of different platforms like Steam and the Nintendo Switch, and it was announced in 2019 that physical releases were planned for the Switch and PS4, so even though this version of the game was only released in Japan, it's far from the only way to play it, making the Dreamcast port more of a collector's item than anything else. Right off the bat, I will say that this is not my favorite shooter on the Dreamcast, not even close really, but I do find it enjoyable, if a bit frustrating. It's a Treasure game, so instead of just a straightforward shooter, which is my personal preference, it features a light and dark bullet mechanic to mix up the gameplay. Basically, when your ship is in light mode, dark bullets harm you, and light bullets power up your ship, and vice versa. Also, opposite colors deal more damage to enemies, and by absorbing bullets that match your color, you power up your ship's super weapon, which is basically a very powerful homing shot, which comes in very handy. You'll be switching back and forth a lot throughout this game, which for me wears a little thin after a while. This is a very challenging game that demands a lot of pattern learning and repeat playthroughs before you can start to really excel at it. So again, it's not my favorite Dreamcast shooter by a long shot, but I do find myself coming back to it quite a bit. And if you're the type of person that likes shoot-'em-ups that are a little outside the norm, you would probably like this game a lot more than I do. Like I said, there are plenty of ways to play this one, so by all means, play whatever works for you. It's Ikaruga, and it's anything but a typical shooter.